Okay, moving right along here. More serious one, I'm going to introduce Russ McLean. And Russ, if anybody that read Schefter's book about all Corvettes are red mentioned, you probably recognize Russ McLean's name. The book was heavily edited by our legal staff at General Motors, and Russ didn't get nearly the credit that he deserves. And he was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he prepared a little speech that I thought was just right, so spot on, and I asked him to come up here and repeat that story with the rest of us, because and this is the next guy that needs to be canonized as a Corvette saint. So anyway, with that, Russ McLean, welcome. Thank
you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. It's extremely gratifying to know that my boss back in the 60s, an AC spark plug, Don Griffin, is here today, so I certainly appreciate you coming, Don. I learned a lot from Don. Pardon?
I need to hear some stories from you about this.
Well, Loris told me that I couldn't tell those stories. So. And I'd also like to thank each of you for your continued support of Corvette and NCRS, because NCRS has always been a cornerstone of Corvette, and the enthusiasm generated through that effort has also created future buyers for Corvette. So keep up the good work, and it's very well recognized and received. I was planning to have a high-tech presentation, but since John had some difficulty getting Greg's computer working, I thought I'd just go with low-tech. I was in Mexico 5 years before coming to Corvette, and during that time, General Motors was going through a lot of difficult financial situations. In Mexico, when I arrived, hadn't made a profit in 20 years, and we were also in a survival mode, just like the U.S. operations. We had to fund all of our vehicle development, plant conversions, and capital investments through our total operations. Nothing came in to us from General Motors of the United States. And during that period of time, there was a tremendous amount of pressure to close down the Mexican operation and transfer everything back to the United States. We received pressure from the U.S. plants, plant management, and the UAW. And the effort down in Mexico, quite frankly, created the environment for us to take that same type of spirit and motivation and system into Corvette to make Corvette a viable entity. During the last 3 years in Mexico, since we were profitable, I finally understood the severity of General Motors' financial situation. We had to transfer large sums of money back to the United States to keep them afloat. Take that out of our profits, but yet keep General Motors viable. I was aware that Corvette was at the bottom of the heap regarding quality, but wasn't aware of their financial situation until I arrived in Warren. Had it not for me being inducted in the Hall of Fame and Warner encouraging me to tell my story about Corvette, it may never have been told. So you'll hear it today for the second time, some of you that were at the induction. So I'd like to give you an overview of what we did in Corvette for the C-4 improvement programs, the C-5 development program, as well as some of the aspects of the direction I was given by my new boss to let the Corvette die. So I'd suggest that you strap on your seatbelt, because we're going to take a very rapid ride and go through a lot of information in a short period of time. I had a jump start in understanding Corvette's performance before Joe Spillman called me and asked me to take over the platform. When in Mexico, we had built up export credits so we could import vehicles, and I chose the Corvette and the Cadillac. I recognized that the Mexican dealerships didn't have the capability to diagnose or repair high-tech vehicles. So I set up a rebuild area and test track at the Ramos Arizpe complex in Saltillo, Mexico. Each car was inspected to corporate and JD Power standards, driven on the test track, and warranty and customer satisfaction data was analyzed and incorporated into a repair approach. I assigned quality engineers to the dealerships to assist them in diagnostic and needed repair, and this information was passed back to the rebuild area as well as a detailed report back to the plant managers. So when Joe called me to take over the platform, I had a very good understanding of Corvette's quality, warranty, and customer satisfaction performance and what steps were required to quickly improve Corvette. At that time, we were losing at an operating level of $1,000 per Corvette, and the sales volume was reducing at a rate of about 900 vehicles per year. I always operated on a basis of, if you can't measure it, you'll never become the best of the best. And the devil's in the detail. With a team, Corvette people thrived in analyzing problems and finding solutions using these techniques. I knew it was paramount to move C-4 Corvette into a competitive position in quality and generate profits very quickly in order to ensure the customers that we could introduce the C-5 to be the best in class. You can only change a person's perception of your service or product by being a leader in quality and customer satisfaction. How many of you have read the All Corvettes Are Red book? All right. Well, Jim Scheffner was one of the first people to seek me out in Warren, and he made sure that I fully understood that Robert Stemple, our CEO, had given him approval to write a C5 book, and he had free access to meetings, people, and information. Jim had already spent about 2 years with Corvette working and focusing on a C5 book. Upon my arrival, I was pleased and pleased by the extreme dedication and connection that the Corvette buyers had with the car. This same atmosphere transcended throughout the Corvette team. Early on, however, I recognized that I needed to develop and focus on a detailed execution of a Corvette business plan and to eliminate outside interferences that historically got us off track. As a manager, it's more important that you do the right thing than doing things right, which in some cases meant pleasing the boss and following directions that weren't optimum, or not having the flexibility to think out of the box. We developed our business plan and then established quality, cost, and enhancement targets for each of the business managers, segmented by the car architecture to enable easy implementation. This segmentation is very important because the weakness of a vehicle design is in the integration and interfaces of the parts and components, and that's where the majority of the extremely difficult quality problems exist. We also assigned 6 of our product engineers to the Bowling Green plant to facilitate the design and quality improvements, and we conducted staff meetings at the plant to monitor progress and make adjustments wherever necessary, and make decisions on the spot to keep the process moving along. We also sent our Corvette quality manager to the Bowling Green plant to become the plant production manager. During the first 2.5 years, the Bowling Green plant reported to me, which helped us to break down some of the barriers and accelerate the improvements. Being a profit center in funding projects through profits and having full control of the bottom line was familiar to me when assigned to Spain and Mexico. One of the key disciplines I learned when arriving at Ramos Arizpe in Mexico is we didn't have enough money to pay our people. So the first thing I had to do was to go to the bank, take out a loan to keep the operation afloat. I vowed to myself that this would never happen to me again, and I'd always make sure that we were in a positive financial and cash flow position. It was important that Corvette quickly established our internal operating systems and reporting systems that would not change throughout the course of the project, and to develop an interface reporting system for corporate formats managed by our business planners, thereby leaving the day-to-day operations and internal reporting formats unchanged. This allowed the team to focus on the execution of their job. Some of the most disruptive aspects that causes lack of focus in a business is the continued change of an organizational system, reporting formats, organizational structure, lack of profits, causing cash flow and employee turnover. All of these held true during the 80s and 90s in GM. We were going through a great deal of turbulence at the time, compounded by organizational structural changes almost continuously. We went from CPC to BOC to front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive vehicles, to strong platform managers, to Big E central engineering, and moving towards a vehicle line executive structure in the matter of 4 years. This was such a confusing time because we hardly had time to become familiar with a new reporting format, and the next change was coming down the pike. Based on this turbulence, it was imperative to show our Corvette organization and keep them focused on their job unencumbered and not change our internal systems. One of the biggest obstacles that Dave Hill, my chief engineer, and I had was employee turnover. We would walk through our departments, take roll call, and see who was reassigned back to central engineering or their homeroom without our knowledge, and if any replacements were there. In some years, our turnover was well in excess of 60%. There's an old saying, you can take the boy away from the farm, but not the farm away from the boy. It holds true if you replace the name farm with Corvette. You can take the boy away from the Corvette, but not Corvette away from the boy. We knew we had to establish an allegiance from those key members who moved back to central engineering, and we could receive work from them secretly and at no cost to the project if necessary. This allegiance was similar to Joe Spillman's blood brother pact that was simulated in my first meetings in Warren, and is referred to in All Corvettes Are Red book. It's a good thing that we actually didn't slit our wrists for each of those packs, because I would have had to have numerous blood transfusions just to survive the first few days on the job. When I arrived, the C-5 was not an approved project. No one was assigned to it or dedicated to it, and all efforts were referred to as scrimmages. The only development work was on the hydroform rails and manufacturing research. However, there was a significant amount of interest in the mid-engine concept, and I guess, Jerry, that came from Zora, and planning to package the North Star engine. Well, we quickly squelched that idea, and we concentrated on the existing engine we had. Corvette's C-4 design during that time was long in the tooth, and they couldn't get funding to make any significant changes, especially since they weren't profitable. Early on, we honed in on the hydroform rails because it gave us substantial improvements in the structure and reduction in the body part count and capital investment. We would eventually develop and build a modular MIG welding body shop off-site and build all the prototypes and pilots there with this dimensionally verified equipment, which also allowed us a very efficient C5 model change conversion. We already had a complete and validated body shop, and all we had to do was transport it to Bowling Green and put it in place, and we were good to go. We also had built a new paint shop that was operational prior to C5, so some of the key elements of the plant conversion was already in place. We decided early on that we needed to have the new body structure for 20 years and needed to accommodate 90% of the population to fit into the car to fill Bowling Green's two-shift capacity. We worked with the University of Michigan, who was studying the ergonomics and packaging of man, and they coined our program as UMPHREE. They told us that if we could package the car to fit a 5'8" person, and a 6'7" person, we could meet our 90% goal. Well, fortunately, we had a quality engineer, Laura Campbell, who was 5 foot tall, and Joe Spillman, who was 6'7". So we had our test people. Since Joe was involved, we renamed our program Umspiel. We also decided to design the car with individual exterior panels to enable low cost and fast to market and reduce our warranty and replacement costs. We also planned that C6 would have fixed headlights, which required a great deal of engineering effort in packaging both pop-up and fixed headlights in the C5 design, thereby preventing unnecessary C6 body redesigns and modifications. In Corvette, we moved from a total profit position in the first year. In the second year, we made a profit of $3,000 per vehicle, total profit, and closed out C4 at a profit level of $8,000 per vehicle. We became the second most profitable vehicle line next to Cadillac, and that's saying a lot for a sales volume of $17,000 a year. We also had closed the gap in quality measurements and became competitive in the high sport group. Unfortunately, Joe Spillman moved, which made my job increasingly more difficult, and our reliance on the Corvette people who had transferred back to Central Engineering pivotal to our success. At my first meeting with my new boss, he informed me that sports cars have no place in General Motors, and that I should only call him if I was in trouble. Well, that was great for me. However, several months later, on my second contact with him, is when he informed me that he had obtained the board of directors' approval to remove Corvette from the core business, and that I was to let the Corvette die, and that he had been cutting my engineering headcount, budget, and capital investment. And he held true to that statement throughout my time with Corvette. I only shared this conversation with my wife, Linda, because I didn't want the Team Corvette people to be distracted and worrying if they had a job or Corvette would still be around. I was determined to keep Corvette alive, and we needed our people to operate and continue to perform at their best. My approach to running the business changed dramatically. I avoided receiving any direct contact from him or any direct orders, and operated under the radar and in the shadows so as not to draw any questions from him. I did, however, send him monthly reports on the C4 product rollout to protect my rear, as I'll cover later. And all celebrations were internal and without fanfare. I operated on the approach of not asking for permission, because I knew he'd say no, and paying the consequences if he found out what we were doing. I didn't tell anyone in General Motors on my boss's direction to kill the car, because I knew if he found out that he would obviously cancel the car immediately and probably kill me. Little did I know at the time, Jim Perkins, Vice President of Chevrolet, was getting the same amount of pressure to cancel the Corvette. I knew from experience that you must establish yourself as the best in class in quality in order to maintain as well as attract new buyers. Everything starts and ends with quality. It was clear to ensure people would buy C5 vehicles from the start of production that first, the C4 quality should be recognized as very competitive, and we needed the magazine writers to support that claim. It was extremely important to increase Corvette's exposure in the news media to revitalize our image and the desirability of owning a Corvette. The first step was to develop a plan to make this happen. So here's how we did it. In the first 6 years, 93 through 98, we'd introduced 6 new vehicles. The 40-year anniversary car, the collector's edition, the pace car, the Grand Sport, which almost lost me my job, the C5, and the C5 pace car. This was an extraordinary effort. And as our quality improved, we planned test drives with the magazine writers to assess their opinion of Corvette's quality and performance improvements. During this time, John Heinersey acted as C-4 Chief Engineer since Dave Hill was concentrating on the C-5 development program in the Launch Center. We also increased the exposure in the news medium by reviewing our contact and communications for the Corvette clubs, celebrating the 1 millionth Corvette built in the Bowling Green plant, the museum groundbreaking in June of '92, announcing Bowling Green would build the C-5 in June of '94, the Corvette Museum opening in September of '94, and ultimately we received the J.D. Power Best in Class appeal rating in 1995 for the C-4 Corvette. A personal thanks goes to Ralph Kramer and Tom Hoxie of Chevrolet, who successfully coordinated all of these events. As I indicated before, we established quality and cost targets for each manager with monthly report outs on progress. We were making good progress, but we were beginning to plateau. So I went to John Harrison. It's great to have people in the Corvette team that not only were development engineers, race car drivers, because they knew how to quickly diagnose and analyze a problem and come up with a solution. So I went to John, and I said, John, how can we identify warranty failures earlier since the unreliable information we had from the corporation data wasn't really supported? John told me that he could set up a 24-hour endurance program and implement fixes. This approach proved to be extremely valuable since we now had accurate data, and we then assigned quality engineers to work with key dealers to improve the warranty and customer satisfaction performance. As fixes were implemented and validated, this also allowed us to incorporate these parts and components into the C-5 design. As the C-4 quality improved and was noticeable by the average driver, we increased the test drives with the magazine writers with favorable results. We also received valuable input from the writers regarding their expectation of C-5 vehicle in terms of styling and performance. Once we firmed out the C-5 design, we then secretly involved some of the Corvette clubs to gain the reaction of the car. One of the biggest risks we took was in 1995 when we took 10 magazine writers on a 2-day C-4 test drive out of Bowling Green. Ralph Kramer, the spokesperson for Chevrolet, stated that he wanted to show these magazine writers conceptual C-5 designs and get their input. Obviously, if they weren't pleased with the C-4 performance improvements and didn't like the C-5 design, our program may be in jeopardy. The big concern I really had was, can we trust the newspaper writers and the magazine writers not to leak out the design information? Well, I was told by Ralph that wouldn't be a problem. He would make sure that that didn't happen. And ultimately, the drive and the information they received was very successful. We now knew, with that confidence that the writers had in us, that we could receive a fair and unbiased evaluation from them going forward, thus continuing to enhance and improve Corvette's image. The Corvette people unselfishly and expertly work through solutions in order to optimize the results. This approach is epitomized by one of the mottos we established. For every decision, we must determine the best for the product, and when conflicts arrive, let the product determine the best solution, not our personal bias in politics. The Corvette culture was founded on being a part of a team, and the team is a car, and it comes first, hence the reference to Team Corvette. In order to generate consistency, focus, predictability on how decisions are made, we established several other mottos, and they became part of our culture. Some of these mottos are being of one mind, one mission, one direction, one objective, and unity of purpose equals success. And as a Team Corvette member, if I say I can do something, this is a commitment to deliver all of the requirements on time, because I know the team's performance will be adversely affected if I don't deliver. We embrace the Three Musketeers saying, one for all and all for one, which was a cornerstone of our success. Now I'd like to share with you some of the memorable events during my time with Corvette. Jim Perkins, Vice President of Chevrolet, and his organization played a key role in improving the C-5 design and making it a success. A significant contribution in obtaining the agreement to pursue C-5 was in Chevrolet funding the C-5 CERV, Chevrolet Engineering Research vehicle. Jim and I, as well as others, like Al Green, responsible for labor relations at the Tech Center, took a tremendous amount of heat for us building this vehicle, not following normal protocol, and in building it outside GM. For 6 months, we had UAW, the corporate financial, audit, and legal staffs reviewing all the documents and having numerous interrogation meetings with us. They even reviewed all of my personal bank accounts. I guess they expected that I got a kickback for having this car built on the outside. Well, over time, the pressure declined and we went on with the development of C-5. If my new boss would have been on the scene at the time, he most assuredly would have immediately killed the car and me. This vehicle was a huge success. We made a calculated risk by getting Harry Pierce, GM's vice chairman, to drive the car around the Tech Center. When he drove the car well over the speed limit and over the very bumpy railroad tracks several times, he was elated at the integrity of the structure, which we would not stop talking about. This test drive sealed the deal on us moving forward on the C-5 development program. We had developed many initiatives to reduce the risk of early failures in C-5. We had over 70% of our parts new on C-5. We had an all-new vehicle, all-new chassis, structure, powertrain, engine, body, and it was a tremendous effort by the Team Corvette people to be focused so we could bring C-5 in top quality right out of the chute. We also introduced several C-5 options early into C-4, such as the rear glass for the convertible in place of plastic. One of the most enjoyable C-5 pull-aheads was the run flat tire. We required C-5 trunk large enough to accommodate 2 sets of golf carts. This meant we had to eliminate the spare. There were 4 states that required a spare, and thanks to Chevrolet, this mandate was lifted. The tire companies told us that you could shoot a 45 caliber bullet through the tire and not have any driving problems for at least 50 miles. So we had a great deal of fun kidding around on the test drive. Who owns a 45? We need a permit. Can we get John Heinrich's caliber of pistols and use that? Well, cooler heads prevailed. And we simply deflated the tire, and the drive was successful. Little did we know that we were well ahead of our time, well before the New England Patriots were accused of The C-4 included numerous costly and one-of-a-kind parts. We knew that the aftermarket division would increase the cost of the parts as much as 15 times on warranty and direct purchases. So we challenged ourselves to find different alternatives of acceptable, lower cost alternatives and validate them in C-4. As an example, the Bill-Sign shocks, mainly used in race cars, was standard in C-4. And eventually we were able to get an in-house supplier to produce those shocks equal to Bill-Sign at a significant savings. A key strategy for C-5 was to initially design it as a convertible, recognizing that historically, convertibles are afterthoughts and their structural integrity is poor and required additional parts to shore it up. After the convertible, we then completed the design of the target, since it would be introduced first, followed by the finalization of the convertible design, and then the fixed roof coupe. This strategy resulted in significant reductions in engineering development time, part count, investment, mass, cost, and increased performance. Another of our key strategies was to rely heavily on designing in math simulations, and the use of synthesis and analysis in place of exhaustive crash tests. This allowed us to dramatically reduce the amount of prototypes, crash vehicles, and components. Using math data, we were able to reduce the time necessary to package the engine compartment, the chassis, as well as completing the convertible and fixed roof coupes at minimal cost. Another strategy we used was, in meeting our capital investment targets, to go straight to production tooling, instead of designing and building prototype tooling and redesigning and building the production tooling. We were very confident that our math-based strategies were solid, and we shouldn't plan for this redundant event for the majority of our parts. A big ticket item that we went directly to production tooling was on the target glass, back glass. This was a high-risk item because of the dip in the glass and the possible visual distortions. But the Corvette team made it happen. All of our efforts was focused on having the best launch possible for C-5 with the highest customer satisfaction rating and the lowest cost. This required us to continually think out of the box without any fanfare. In order to obtain the approval to officially launch the C-5, we were required to have Jack Smith, GM CEO, and his executive committee approve the project. After we completed all the required presentations and financials, I was asked to come back again for final approval. Our program was lean, a totally new, ground-up vehicle, and didn't follow the normal program approaches of excessive prototypes, lengthy tests, retests, and program redirections. After I made my presentation, Ron Haas, GM's VP of Quality, stated that he wouldn't approve the program since we didn't follow the normal procedure of having between 100 and 300 prototypes, crash vehicles, and components. And if not, we wouldn't meet our program targets. On a comparative basis, this in dollar terms would be far greater than my entire capital investment budget for the project. And all the financials and business plan would have to be recalculated. I got up and again reviewed our math strategy, simulation, analysis plan, and told Jack Smith, we will meet our targets. Jack stood up, smiled, looked at the group, informed them that he was approving the project and maybe the corporation can learn something from Corvette and have a new way of developing vehicles. Rod Haas, angrily, leaned over and quietly told Jim Schiffner that he'd follow our progress, and when Corvette failed, he'd have my job. Well, the bottom line, Corvette did not fail. As a special note, the corporation identified the Corvette program as the template for the future VLE structure, which is a tribute to Team Corvette's people and their achievements. The development of a new vehicle always results in trade-offs when considering alternatives. The key is to optimize the end result of the vehicle. Initially, we wanted to have an electric convertible top. However, we then couldn't get two sets of golf clubs in the trunk. So we set the specification for a manual top that the driver could raise and lower the top at a stoplight from the driver's seat. The manual top also helped us to meet our platform targets. I had numerous contacts with my new boss when I wasn't sure if I still had a job. I might come in the next day to find my door locked, my name off on the door, and all my belongings were secured. One of those encounters with the Grand Sport. That's why I'm wearing my Grand Sport shirt of 20 years. And you're familiar with the Grand Sport paint scheme. You know, it's undefilable. You can take it out of a car. My wife always wanted a Grand Sport. Well, she didn't get one, and I guess John Heimerson bought #1, so you're going to have to marry my wife, John, so she can.
I'll take one for the team.
Please don't tell my wife I said that. One of the key aspects of the car was increased horsepower at a minimal cost. I wanted an additional 50 horsepower at a cost less than $200 per engine. So I went to John again, and he in turn worked with Bill Nichols and Jim Menaker from the engine group and came up with a plan of meeting that 50 horsepower target at $200 by using some of the race car engine modifications. So again, it's great to have somebody who knows cars and knows racing. I wanted the customer to pay an additional premium for the option, but have the same horsepower for standard for C5 without a premium. This is a great selling point for the launch of C5. We sold well over 800 Grand Sports, and for that option alone, made $1.2 million. A great return on investment. Back to my new boss. I received a call from his secretary at 6 in the afternoon stating that I'd be flying with him to Bowling Green the following morning. She couldn't give me a reason for the trip, so this, to my knowledge, was the first time a platform manager had ever traveled with the boss to an assembly plant, so I expected the worst. As a note, the Grand Sport was in my marketing rollout plan for the last 2 years. He always received a copy of the rollout plan and never questioned it. When I arrived at the airport, the manufacturing manager was there accompanying us down to Bowling Green, and that flight was somewhat uneventful. However, when we went directly to the plant and walked by the first Grand Sport painted body setting in the entrance aisle, my boss went ballistic. When we walked by the second, and the third, and the fourth, within 50 yards, he got even worse. He screamed at me and said, "Who approved this car?" And I said, "I did. And it's been on the marketing rollout plan for the last 2 years, and you always received a copy of the plan." Well, that made me a little bit. He then told me, "Cancel the car." And I said, "I won't, because it's an integral part of our product plan and marketing strategy." By the time we got back to Detroit, he'd already told me that he's reducing our engineering budget again and removing all of our corporate paint support people from the plant, and he did. Well, fortunately for me, the key paint support person was my paint shop superintendent in Doraville, so he secretly continued to support the project without charging me. Nice to have friends. After the Bowling Green visit, my new boss recognized that he couldn't stop Corvette or the C5 development effort. He told me my career was done. I'd never be promoted, nor would I ever be a BLE. Well, our relationship got worse going forward. But bottom line, it was the best decision we made, and best for Corvette and the Corvette people. Dave Hill and I strongly supported Corvette's re-entry back into racing. And the Grand Sport, our Grand Sport, was a key concept in introducing the C5 fixed roof coupe, stripped down version that went very fast. The fixed roof coupe was planned to be low volume. However, Dave and Taz Schechter were able to transfer the concept into Z06. The C5 vehicle was the avenue back to racing, and thanks to Herb Fischel from Chevrolet, who made it happen, we can now say, as Chevrolet would, we'll win on Sundays and sell on Mondays. It had not been for C5 surviving, possibly Chevrolet's racing would have been in jeopardy. Another key ingredient in moving the product designs along was Dave and my weekly meetings with John Cafaro and Jerry Palmer in the design studios. Jerry and John were always considered part of the Corvette team. And over time, we have built up the confidence and teamwork to make those critical trade-offs to optimize the design, maintain our program timing, and meet our platform targets. We designed C5 from the inside out, which is a departure from how previous groups would do it. Because we wanted to make sure that everything fit under the skin. So we did a simultaneous design. John would be doing the exterior, Dave and John would be doing the interior, and as we improved and finalized our designs, the shape of the exterior skin changed. But the ultimate objective is we got what we wanted from a design standpoint, and we got what we wanted from an engineering standpoint. But the comical thing, John Cafaro always wanted the largest mirrors, the largest wheels, and the largest tailpipes he could ever get. He was always coming back to us and, can we use this? Can we make this larger? We actually increased the diameter. We were initially thinking about 2 tailpipes. And then John said, no, you gotta have 4. So we had 4. And then we had smaller tailpipes. Oh, it gotta be bigger. So we actually ended up having the tailpipes about twice the diameter that we planned for the 2. So John got his way. He got the biggest tailpipes possible. But we got our way because it meant all of the noise passed by regulations and engine performance standards. One of the most unique applications we had of thinking out of the box was to improve stiffness, reduce noise and vibration and mass, was to incorporate a lightweight sandwich composite balsa wood fiber floor. If the Corvette would have been an amphibious vehicle, obviously it would have helped keep afloat. And who would have thought that balsa wood would far surpass and outperform metal in this application? We actually had to write a long-term contract with a Brazilian balsa tree farm to ensure we had enough balsa wood for production. Dave Hill was always finding unique ways to get road time in C5 architecture and not allowing the news media to photograph the cars. He came up with a concept to hide the C5 architecture covered by a Camaro exterior. This proved to be extremely valuable because we put thousands upon thousands of miles without having an early photograph taken and proving out the architecture of C5. This approach was far superior than historically what we would do of camouflaging the car with a car cover, which also enticed the magazine writers to follow that car and try to take a photograph. The risk and reward of every new venture either scares the organization or inspires them to obtain success that had never been achieved before. The latter is the heart and soul of the Corvette culture. It's important when introducing a new vehicle that you establish the leanest achievable program so you'll be competitive out of the chute and not in the catch-up mode. Through all the engineering and manufacturing efforts, just to name a few, we were able to achieve a C5 reduction in build hours by 30%, a part number count reduction by well over 35%, improved structural integrity by 4.5 times, as well as increased profits, quality, and performance. And that's going from 2 C4 vehicles to 3 C5 vehicles. Linda and my daughters always criticized me for not being involved with exciting cars until the Corvette came along. And it was hard to keep them from sneaking the car out and driving it to their friend's house. But I managed to make that not happen. But I remember one of the most enjoyable drives I had bringing a test car home with C5 options was my wife Linda had been sick with the flu. So I said, Linda, we got to get out of the house. Let's just take a little while. So she said, okay. She got in the car. I drove down a very quiet street, lightly traveled, checked to see if there was any police cars around, and there weren't. So I made a U-turn, floored the car, tires squealing, the front end lifting off the road, Linda screaming, Oh, it was quite a ride. But I sure did get a scolding from her saying, never to do that again. But you know, I'm sure that she felt a lot better after the ride. One of the most enjoyable and memorable drives I took was at Black Lake in the Milford Proving Grounds. If you know Black Lake, it's a large asphalt area where maneuverability tests are conducted. Dave Hill and his team had developed an active handling system. And John Heinersey challenged me to take a drive, and he said, Russ, you can't roll the car over on any maneuver. Well, I accepted the challenge with a little apprehension. So full throttle. I did figure eights, hard right turns, hard left turns, panic stops, full acceleration. What a car. This was greater than any roller coaster ride that I've ever taken. I felt like a stunt car driver in an action movie and completely safe. What a great perk of the job. Corvette was a great experience for me. Where in the world can you be part of the development of a sports car? Easily fit a 6'7" person into the car, that you can go 0 to 60 at that time at 4.8 seconds, achieve 25 miles per gallon, place 2 sets of golf clubs in the trunk, and having more computing power than the first spaceship to the moon. In closing, I'd like to give special recognition during my time with Corvette some of the key and vital individuals who helped save the Corvette and kept the Corvette way alive. The first, and posthumously, is to Dan Gable, who pledged his life to making the Corvette Museum a reality. If it were not for Dan Gable lighting the flame and keeping it burning, there may not have been a museum today. And we thank Dan and owe him a great debt of gratitude. Now next is Joe Spillman, who kept Corvette viable and used his initiative and muscle to allow it not to fade into obscurity until our quality and cost targets were achieved and we earned the right to get the C-5 project approved. If it were not for Joe and his love for Corvette, it may have been the first vehicle eliminated by GM before Oldsmobile, Pontiac, and Saturn. Jim Perkins and his key Chevrolet players got us through some very tough times. Jim was always there to provide support and assistance and bail me up, especially after my new boss arrived. It was extremely comforting and gratifying to know that Jim and his team were armed, dedicated, and ready to do whatever it took to keep Corvette alive. And lastly, I'd like to recognize the Team Corvette people. They were like family to me, and I feel honored to be a part of something great. And they're truly deserving of all of the honors bestowed on C-4 and C-5 and every new Corvette going forward. Thanks for your attention, and thanks for the great work in supporting NCRX.